thank you to the Sloan Conference. It's an incredible event. Our company has the pleasure of sponsoring and attending over half a dozen conferences a year, and this one always stands out for a handful of reasons, and one of it has to do with the passion of the students who are really driving the conference forward and organizing everything, and so they just do a tremendous job of that. The goal of this competition is in line with the goals of our company. We always want to help our partner sports teams innovate. And what better way to innovate than learn from the future, not just consumers, but also the future sports business leaders. Michael Larimore, who's representing our team, we met him because his team was one of the finalists, and they presented a very captivating case. And so this provides a great opportunity for us to meet future students and learn from their ideas, but also I think solve some of the key problems that sports teams are facing in terms of revenue on the ticketing side. We're joined on the sponsorship with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are a tremendous business operation. Fear is not in their vocabulary. They're always the first to literally jump in the pool and try out new ideas. That's a joke referencing the fact that they have cabana suites that have pools in them. But it's always, we've been partners with them for a handful of years, and we do an annual big in-person recap, and the conversation goes for hours and hours because we're just sharing so many ideas and learning so much. So they're a tremendous partner. The Astros and Rockets in Houston. Houston is a phenomenally interesting sports city. One of the reasons it's so interesting is that we notice in a lot of markets, some markets are very heavy with a Ticketmaster presence, or they're very heavy with a StubHub presence. Houston is very diverse. AXS is a large player, in large part because of the Rockets as well as the Houston Rodeo. The Astros have their platform plus StubHub. The Texans use Ticketmaster. So Houston's a breeding ground for ticketing innovation. So we're really happy for Jay and Winston to join us. Obviously, a brand like Deloitte does so much in the consulting space that getting their expertise in the world of sports is extremely valuable, not just for the conference, but sports teams across the board. So really excited. We've done some previewing of, quite frankly, the 30 contests that were submitted were all off the charts. Brilliant minds. Kudos to the Sloan team for kind of narrowing it down to the final 3. This should be a very exciting contest. And without further ado, Lorcan, if there's anything else I should...
Just want to introduce the case.
Great.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you. And so our 3 teams have been working on addressing how do you balance the sales of premium tickets and non-premium tickets at NFL stadiums. And so without further ado, I will let the first team from Duke kick things off for us.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning. So we are from the Fuqua School of Business, and we have created a data-based regression approach to optimize the premium seating ratio within your arena. This is, again, going to dictate sales strategies and product strategies downstream and allow you to sell a differentiated experience across your customer base. So moving straight into the model, kind of the nuts and bolts, we grab data from 22 teams across the 4 major sports leagues. So the main buckets that we're trying to answer, define how we're trying to answer the question of what drives variation in ticketing revenue. So the first bucket is economic factors. And we collected this data by looking at GDP by metropolitan area. The second is team performance. This was a trailing 5-year winning percentage and a championship in the last 5 years, or a championship in general within the franchise's existence. In the third bucket, we have the premium seat ratio, which is merely a ratio of premium seats as a function of your stadium capacity. So as we look into again, we're trying to analyze what is the effect on ticketing revenue, what causes variation in this performance. So looking at the results of our 4-league model, again, this is across 122 teams, we see that the biggest driver of revenue is on-field performance, followed by economic factors. Here, the premium seating ratio does not have statistical significance. More on that later. If you'd like to navigate to our bit.ly link here at the bottom, we have a graphical representation of our data, and it'll take you to a Tableau dashboard. When we remove the other 3 leagues and focus just on the NFL, we find again that on-field performance is the leading contributor to ticket revenue, but quickly followed by economic factors. This plays a more intense role than the 4-league model, and ultimately is going to affect ticket revenue in the long term. Here, different than the 4-league model, the premium seating ratio is statistically significant. A fun way to think about how these balance within ticket revenue performance is that raising the premium seating ratio by 10% is equivalent of raising your team performance by 2.5%, which is the equivalent of about half a game per year. This model also has an R-squared of 0.81, which means that 81% of the variation in ticketing revenue is explained by the factors that we've chosen. So now that we have an understanding of kind of the nuts and bolts of our model and some of the results, I'm going to hand it off to Sam, who's going to talk about what these mean for the prompt.
Thank you, Taylor. So as Taylor mentioned, we looked at 3 classes of variables. We looked at what happens outside the stadium, economic indicators of the local metropolitan area. We looked at what happens between the sidelines, on-field performance. And then we looked at variables that happen between those two, aspects specific to your specific stadium. And we came up with a model that explains, when looking just at NFL teams, 81% of the variation across ticketing revenue. Our theory was that if we looked at the residual amount, what's not explained by our model, we normalized that data, and then we applied tests of statistical significance against that data, we could come up with the franchises that were beating the average, who were outperforming where they should be in ticket revenue. And once we had that, we could normalize on specific constraints unique to each scenario, and we could come up with a good idea of what the optimal ticket premium ratio is given a set of constraints. So for each of the scenarios laid out, we did that. For scenario A, this is a high-performing market in a volatile performing team space. We define that as the top third of economic markets that we looked at and the middle third of on-field performance. Scenario A has an average ticket price of $150 and a premium bump on top of that for premium seats of 140%. When we constrain on those specific values, our model predicts an optimal premium ticket percentage of just under 19%. This is an increase of about 4% on the existing 15% premium ratio within the stadium. So this, assuming we'd convert seats and not add seats to the stadium, this would represent an incremental amount of revenue of about $112,000 per game. Over the course of a regular season, this is $1 million extra of ticketing revenue. We applied similar logic for scenarios B and C. For scenario B, we came up with an increase of roughly 2.3%, which represents $300,000 in incremental extra revenue each year. And for scenario C, we did something similar and came up with an optimal number of about 17.5%, again, right around that $300,000 incremental revenue per year. So once you have your optimal number, and you have these specific inside and between inside the field and outside the stadium constraints, you can use that number and those insights to drive specific recommendations. At a high level, for scenario A, we recommend that given we are increasing premium seat percentage by quite a bit compared to the other two, and given that the premium seat bump is about 140% compared to around 110% of the other two scenarios, we recommend increasing average season ticket price, but keeping the overall premium ticket price constant and focusing on using that really strong economic market that you're playing in to drive premium ticket sales. For scenario B, this is a very strong performing team in a middle tier economic market. So our recommendation, there's over 90% of these tickets are season tickets. So you should leverage that high-end on-field performance to drive continued ticket sales and continued ticketing revenue. Remember, that is the highest driver of ticketing revenue across all the variables we looked at, and really focus on solidifying that ticket base. Scenario C is a lower performing team in a lower performing market. So given that you cannot rely on on-field performance or outside economic factors, the two leading drivers of these ticket sales, we recommend looking at ways to sell differentiated experiences and other early conversion strategies to get people in the stands. And Molly's going to talk about those in a second. So question 2 of the prompt was, Should teams put caps on different products based on market conditions and stadium constraints? And the answer to that is unequivocally yes. Teams must do that. Our model gives you the premium ticket percentage that will maximize your ticketing revenue. And then once you have that number, there are some specific strategies that you can employ to drive higher ticketing revenue based on what's happening outside the stadium and between the lines.
Thanks, Sam. So let's talk about those sales strategies. So we want to segment your customer base into your non-premium customers and your premium customers. Your non-premium customer is typically a first-time buyer or a less loyal fan, somebody who is discriminating based on price. Many times they're using the secondary ticket market to find the best seat within their budget. For these ticket buyers, you're selling attendance at the game. And in terms of selling to them, you should focus on higher volume sales efforts like social media and email to engage with them. In contrast, your premium ticket buyers are a lot of times a loyal fanatic or somebody who has connections in the community. For them, they're looking for a differentiated experience or some exclusivity. For them, you really are selling the experience as opposed to selling attendance at the game. And this experience starts with the ticket buying process. So you need to be engaging them upfront in high-touch, personalized experiences. Now, this is all based on you being able to control the premium seating and actually reaching out to people. Let's talk about hedging risks against things you cannot control, like your team's on-field performance, the weather, or controversy. We think of this as in 3 different buckets. We have your early promotions, your secondary market engagement, and your packaging of experiences. First, in early promotions, you can partner with local organizations to drive fan engagement and increase positive PR. You can also partner with the secondary ticket market. By doing this, you're gaining more of the transaction value while using a very efficient means of distribution. Additionally, it provides you another opportunity to get customer data. When you grab that customer data and join it together with your customer data that you have from selling directly to your other customers, you can curate packaged experiences based on what your fans are looking for. Again, if we think back to scenario C, which was in a lower tier, lower performance, lower economic area, our model indicates you should increase the premium seating ratio there as well. And this is truly because to hedge against the risk of poor on-field performance, you're selling the experience of the game.
As we've explained, we believe we have the optimal premium seating ratio for you. So we believe we have the answer to your downstream sales and product strategies. So thank you for your time. I'll open it up for Q&A. We also have an appendix in the back that walks through some of the scenario planning if you would like to discuss that further.
So I'll start, I guess. You mentioned that with the secondary market buyers, you should focus on selling to them during the game. Do you have any specific ideas on how to do that and how to really segment and understand who those customers are?
Sorry, so to clarify, sell to them during the game, I guess we're selling attendance at the game.
Versus selling the experience, you recommended that those people should be more catered to at the game, right?
Yeah, so what I mean by that is that instead of selling them some experience that you're looking to combat against some other experience that they could have outside of the stadium, they're coming for the game, and so you should look to actually be selling that they get to be at the game at that point. So not necessarily selling to them while they're at the game, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Did you guys feel that the tiers that we established maybe limited some of your analysis? If you had sort of an open-ended approach to defining the teams, would you have had slightly different conclusions?
Yeah. So I think our model gives a really good framework given sort of generic constraints, and I think what was nice about the scenarios that you gave is that it was pretty clear upper third, middle third, or lower third. But certainly the nice thing about our model is that we're pretty confident that we could have applied any set of constraints, or we could have segmented those with more precision, or we could have made those buckets broader. So I think there was certainly, I wouldn't use the word limitation, I think there was some structure provided by that, but there's also the opportunity to use this data to drive different insights no matter how you want to bucket it.
Good job, guys. Well thought out, well delivered. Can you talk us through how you decided to use the 4-team model versus the NFL-specific model for the analysis?
So as I mentioned, we tried to normalize the data, and there just wasn't enough data if we only looked at 32 NFL teams. But we found that we were able to normalize the data across the 4 different teams. The other thing as well, on what's happening on the field might be apples to oranges. Dollars are dollars, right? So like if teams are doing something well in a different league that's generating ticket revenue based on their premium seating percentage, that's still useful information to lean on.
And do you think the data set, including other major sports, the premium ratio would be different because of the differences in those games and how fans consume those games?
Certainly. So I think if you look at the NFL, these are much bigger stadiums. They oftentimes have designated premium spots, whereas at an NBA game, the stadiums are much smaller. The premium amenities might be ancillary additions to the product, but your actual seat might be right next to someone who did buy just entry to the game in a non-premium setting.
Thank you.
Did you guys consider any nonlinear models when you were regressing on regression and the factors in on team performance and premium inventory ratio?
I'm sorry, what did we consider what?
Did you consider any nonlinear models when you were regressing on revenue and the other factors in your model?
Yeah, we looked at it. The easiest way that we found to normalize it was a linear approach, but we certainly looked at exponential distributions and other things like that.
Okay. Did that improve like the quality of, or I guess the predictive accuracy of the model at all?
The highest R squared that we were able to achieve was with the linear model.
Oh, it was linear? Okay.
Yeah.
When one of the implicit assumptions in your analysis seems to be that an incremental increase in the prices in a couple of these scenarios will be tolerated by the fan base, or at least not result in a reduction or any impact to the sales volume. Did you have any in those two scenarios? Did you have any data points in your analysis to back up that assumption?
So I think if we looked at the 3 specific scenarios, scenario A had that premium bump of 140%. The other 2 were only 110. So we did see some wiggle room, especially because scenario A was not a high-performing team. We saw some wiggle room in terms of bumping their non-premium ticket prices. Overall, I think certainly there is some diminishing returns and ultimately negative returns to continuing to increase prices. Our model didn't predict that we were at that point for any of these scenarios.
Okay. But outside of the context of the model, did you find any evidence externally that would suggest the level of tolerance for those type of price increases?
So, given our model, we wouldn't have suggested an increase in price had the economic factors not backed it up. So, but that is the extent of that driver and how it's affecting ticket revenue. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now we'll hand over to the Michigan Ross School of Business.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Preston Pham, and I'm joined by Jason Rock and Zach Zimmerman. We're representing the University of Michigan and Ross School of Business. First, thank you to EventElect, Jacksonville Jaguars, and of course, the team at M.I.T. Sloan. We're obviously huge sports fans, and we're super excited to be here, especially Zach, who has forced me to acknowledge that he grew up an hour away from Jacksonville. I'm sure it comes as no surprise that we've come to the conclusion that NFL teams need to reevaluate the premium ticket. The premium ticket is more than just a box seat. It's an incredibly versatile ticket. It's a ticket plus an additional amenity. And that can be a ticket plus a parking voucher or a ticket plus an exclusive experience. And NFL teams need to leverage this kind of flexibility to bring fans from off the couch and back into the stands. Now, with honest and accurate data paired with Event-Elect's ticket pricing technology, NFL teams can create the right experience for the right fan at the right price. Now, before we got into the calculations, we really wanted to understand the state of the league. And as you can tell, the ticket attendance has been pretty stagnant while the revenue has been on a continuous rise. This could be due to a variety of reasons. However, one of the biggest reasons is because TV is still pretty convenient. The experience has gotten a lot better. Like, for example, have you seen the Red Zone? I could spend 6 hours on a Sunday and watch the Red Zone continuously. On the other hand, the stadium in-stadium experiences remain the same. There's an economic opportunity here, and it comes from boosting revenue while maximizing the profit by focusing on the fan first. We really wanted to test out the three-tiered approach that was given to us in the prompt, but we also wanted to take it a step further. Now, as you can see, in Tier 1, it's a democratized experience, all right? And your team on that end of the spectrum is having a tough time selling tickets, and you're from a non-affluent market. So you want to democratize that experience. On the other end of the spectrum, your team comes from a very affluent market. Your team is selling out all of their seats, and so you want to keep that experience exclusive. Now, I'm excited to hand it off to Jason, where he's going to talk about the calculations that went into this spectrum.
All right, thanks, Preston. So this idea that high-level market size and fan base ratings drive ticket demand, it seems rather intuitive. So what we wanted to do at a high level was actually try to test out this hypothesis quantitatively. But we also felt that a single analysis wasn't sufficient. Instead, our goal was to design a repeatable algorithmic process that would allow every NFL franchise to continually evaluate where they stand. Now, the first thing we had to do for this was actually just try to identify some variables we thought would be impactful. This goes from very obvious ones like medium market size or fan ratings, all the way to getting a bit more creative, looking at city infrastructure scores or Fortune 1000 companies present. Next, we needed to understand exactly how impactful these variables were. We ran a series of statistical analyses, primarily aimed at looking how these variables impact both operating income and attendance percentage. But after we understood our data a bit more, we still needed some sort of output. We needed a way to visualize the variation we had hypothesized exists across the league. In order to do this, we created a normalized scoring system, one that takes each of these variables and applies a weight that's based on the statistical significance we had found in our analysis. This scoring system places each team uniquely, resulting in a mathematically accurate distribution of the entire NFL. So here you see our output with the market index on the horizontal and the fan index on the vertical. But to understand exactly what this is telling us, let's take a look at a few teams. First, we see the New York Giants, who, despite a relatively low fan index rating, still find themselves in the upper echelon of the distribution. This is due to New York's enormous market. But on the other end of the spectrum, the Green Bay Packers, who operate in the NFL's smallest market, still find themselves near the top tier. This is due to Green Bay's absolutely incredible fan base. But more importantly, it also signifies that Green Bay should have a fundamentally different premium ticket strategy than other small market teams. Now, while we do have these tiers approximated across our distribution, we see very quickly the variation that exists across the league. Teams should embrace this variation, diving deep into the factors that drive individual team needs. Now, while our model itself is statistically validated, it doesn't come without risk. First and foremost, data integrity. Let's take a look, for example, at this snapshot, a Week 4 game between the Saints and Giants. We'll go ahead and let you draw your own conclusions on if that day MetLife Stadium was at near capacity attendance. But this isn't too much of a worry for us because we do believe that every team will have an internal understanding of their own data. Another risk is along the lines of tech, the ability to continually evaluate team standing. But Event-Elect has already proven their excellence within this space, leaving us with little concern. Now, while we do believe it is imperative to identify and analyze these risks, after doing so, we're confident that none will substantially impact the sales and marketing activations that result from team placement on these indices, a topic Zach's going to take us a bit deeper into.
Thank you. So from there, we took the tiers that were given to us in the prompt, and we combined those with the results of the analysis that Jason just walked you through. And that allowed us to add a bit more detail to each of the three groups, specifically around the target consumer, the primary business objective, and the overarching definition of premium. Now, that third point to us is especially important because we don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all solution for premium ticket definition or allocation. But for the purposes of illustration and to stay on brief, we've identified who we believe is the best match for each of the three now data-supported tiers. The Cowboys for Tier 1, the Ravens for Tier 2, and the Jaguars for Tier 3. The following slides take us through some specific sales and marketing strategies for teams in each of those tiers, with baseline premium ticket ratios indicating the shift from exclusivity to accessibility as we move across that spectrum. All right, so let's kick things off with the Cowboys. This is a team with a globally recognized brand and with virtually bulletproof attendance numbers year over year. So there really isn't a need to use premium tickets to incentivize fans to attend. Instead, the Cowboys should leverage their brand and affluent market to cater to a high-end crowd looking for exclusivity. And we think there's a really nice parallel that already exists in Las Vegas, where high rollers are given personalized attention from the point of planning through the end of their stay. And we think the Cowboys should adopt a similar model. And since these are fans who are going to games with the intentions of being seen, simply increasing exposure on the Jumbotron will boost the perceived value of that ticket. Next in Tier 2, we have the Baltimore Ravens, a playoff team with an upward trajectory. Now, for the three of us, we felt that this tier was the most fascinating because there exists the most natural variation. So on the one hand, you have a team exactly like the Packers that has generations of diehard fans, but comes from a very small market. And on the other hand, you have teams from wealthier areas, but that have struggled to cultivate the same sort of fan loyalty. Either way, the commonality is that there's the perception of on-field success, and we feel that teams need to tap into this excitement in delivering an accessible yet specialized premium experience. So one of our favorite tactics, marketing tactics from this tier is a subscription box service that pairs single game tickets with exclusive team merch, because we feel that will encourage fans to go to the games and then rep their teams with pride. Other ideas like a beat the spread night or even just traditional player meet and greets will further drive that emotional connection to the team and thus increase attendance. And lastly, in Tier 3, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Preston kindly gave into my threats earlier and alluded to the fact that I am a Daytona Beach, Florida native, so this is a team that's near and dear to my heart. But the Jags aren't alone as a small market team looking to regain its footing on the field. And for teams in this position, we believe they need to use premium tickets simply to get fans to come to the games on game day. And we think this is best done through a loyalty program. So fans can earn points simply by showing up, but the key here is that those points need to be redeemable for things fans actually care about, like significantly discounted concessions or special experiences like getting to pick the next song that plays in the stadium. And although this doesn't feel as premium as what we described in Tier 1, we strongly believe that by democratizing the premium ticket experience, teams in Tier 3 can begin to habitualize attendance.
Defining premium ticket strategy through fixed ratios only begins to scratch the surface of this potential at hand. Instead, every NFL franchise should determine specific team objectives through continuously evaluating the factors at play, driving franchise market size and fan support. Vital to this success is a partnership with Eventelect, taking their industry expertise in dynamic pricing and applying it to this optimization of premium ticket strategy. Through this better understanding of the drivers behind this trend for a premium fan experience, the NFL and Eventelect will fundamentally transform the ticket industry. On behalf of Michigan Ross, we thank you for your time and would love to answer any questions you may have.
Sure, I understood. So in the last scenario there, you're essentially saying that half the seats in the stadium should have some kind of premium experience, even if that is not a physical change to the seating, but it's that half the seats have something premium about them or about the experience.
Exactly. So first of all, I just want to reiterate that those are rough baselines and mostly to illustrate the shift across the accessibility to exclusivity spectrum. But to answer your question, absolutely. We think that because the premium ticket in itself is such a flexible term that teams that are just trying to draw fans to attend on game day should use the semantics of premium to their advantage and offer the perception of something more to get people off their couches and to show up. So that's exactly what we're saying.
Okay, and so the numbers 25, 40, 50%, they seem a little bit like round numbers to some degree. So were those just roundings of something that was like 41.1% rounded to 40, or are those really more qualitative in how they approach
no, not at
the
all.
actual number?
It's more so based on once you see the variation across the league, it quickly becomes apparent that any one number isn't going to be accurate, and even if it is accurate today, it may not be accurate tomorrow. God forbid the market crash. That's going to completely change the way that you're trying to sell out your stadium. So what this is, again, it is a rounded number. It's saying that, hey, at the high end, we need to target added revenue through the exclusive experience, but at the low end, we just need to get people in the stadium.
Okay.
And in these different scenarios with the 25, the 40%, you're not necessarily envisioning it being defined geographically in the stadium. It's like somebody in the upper deck could be premium because of sort of benefits they've subscribed to versus the person next to them may just simply want the ticket.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was another fun thing for us to battle with is that, you can tailor a premium experience to different fans at the same game. So not everybody in the stadium would necessarily even have the same premium ticket. But again, we were just mostly illustrating with points that played into that, again, the accessibility to exclusivity and how you could target a more mass audience with things that are premium but less labor or capital intensive to the teams versus the more exclusive experiences like the Cowboys could provide. So absolutely, like you could have two people sitting next to each other at the games. One has access to being able to play a song in the stadium soundtrack and the other one doesn't.
Did you do any sort of sensitivity analysis on the premium ratio on attendance and operating income?
So we did. Once we found that there was statistical significance between both some of these fan drivers and market drivers, the most important part was seeing that the variation was statistically supported.
Sure.
Because of this, any number that we were going to come up with was, number one, outdated by the time we got here, but also would have to be iteratively evaluated. So the variation itself was the most important part for us to statistically validate.
Did you feel like any of the factors that you used have opportunity to be improved by a team or a city? I mean, a lot of them look like they're pretty static they're more city controlled than team controlled. But are there any that stood out? What could the Jaguars do to kind of improve their situation?
Yeah, one that we really talked about was infrastructure, because we know that transportation to games is massively different as you go from one team to another. So for the Jags, for example, it's tough to get to games. And in that case, a premium ticket could be a ticket plus an Uber code that gets you there, or a ticket plus a fan shuttle that goes from sort of centralized location. So we really thought there was a lot of variation within infrastructure that, the Jags couldn't necessarily add public transportation to the city of Jacksonville, but they definitely could make it easier for fans to get to games.
I really like the idea of kind of flipping the premium, so to speak, on its head. How does that impact pricing power and the ability to drive revenue off of this?
Yeah, so again, I think it depends what team you're talking about, and that plays back into the variation that Jason's now mentioned a few times. So for a team like the Cowboys, they're not really concerned about necessarily bringing fans in to drive increased revenue, because the fans are going to show up regardless. So they can develop more of these high-end experiences that maximize their profit. And then again, on the other end of the spectrum, a team from a smaller market, they just need people to come to the stadium, because every person that doesn't come is lost ticket value, is lost concession value, is lost brand loyalty in purchasing additional gear. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that we looked at. Great. That answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Good job, guys. Did you think about the impact of additional overhead that teams would see to manage this expansion of the premium space?
We did think about it. I think it was more in terms of not necessarily the overhead, but what they would have to discount to make it happen. So again, playing back into the loyalty program idea, it's kind of counterintuitive that fans collect points for showing up, and then you're giving them massive discounts on concessions. But we saw that the Falcons dramatically decreased their concessions prices, and they still saw an increase in net profit. So We did look at that as a factor, but again, we think that attendance will override any of those additional costs. Thank you, guys.
So now we have our second team from the Fuqua School of Business at Duke. The interesting thing to note about these two teams is it's a battle of the MBA year groups. Our first group were first-year MBAs, and the second group are the second-year MBAs.
Good morning. Yes, so as you just heard, we are the group of second-year MBAs from Duke Fuqua. And I want to assure you, I talked to our classmate Zion, and he told me that I should double-check the security of my shoes on stage, so we should be good to go. My name is Rob Belk. This past summer, I was at the NFL, and I worked in the Club Business Development Group.
I'm Tanya Osher, and I spent my summer at Nike's Global Sports Marketing Analytics team.
My name is Nianth Anand, and I worked in business analytics with the Denver Broncos.
So the NFL is coming off a pretty great season. We saw a really competitive product, and viewership was up. However, attendance was down for almost half the clubs. And I don't think it's because people are disinterested in football. I think it's because that experience is not on par with expectations. So I want you to ask yourself, how are you differentiating your experience for your fans? We believe you can differentiate by focusing on a couple of different areas. First, let's bring back that cool factor to going to games. Second, invest in the digital experience and leverage mobile ticketing technology. Third, customize your experience so that it's unique for each fan and has some really cool premium products. Because fourth, we think there's a certain type of customer, namely the millennial, who really wants these unique, customizable, and premium products. And when we talk about premium in this presentation, we aren't just limiting that to a great seat location. We actually see this as also being products or amenities that you can purchase and add on to your game day. Because for us, we think the customer needs have changed. But that doesn't mean you should focus on customer needs in one market the same as another. Today, we're going to walk you through our analysis. We've actually compiled a unique data set in which we've driven demand and willingness to pay for premium products. We took the 3 given scenarios and we tried to match those up with existing franchises, pretty much just based on some of the numbers. Let's focus in on the Panthers and scenario B. We know that Bank of America Stadium holds roughly 73,000 fans. The Panthers have just over 9,000 premium seats. So for today, their ratio from premium to total is 0.13. However, our analysis with these new incremental premium products shows that they should increase that ratio to around 0.42. We also find increases for all 3 scenarios. In that ratio is embedded with a lot of incremental premium dollars. This slide has a lot going on, but what I want you to do is focus your attention on the right side. The team before us talked about the Falcons. We too were really impressed with what they've done. They took a risk by decreasing concession prices by 50%, and they saw an increase in revenue of 16%. We applied that logic to tickets for teams that weren't meeting capacity and weren't selling out. What if those teams decrease their ticket price to the ratio where the demand increases to capacity? You've now lowered the barrier of entry into your stadium. Fans have more money, and we believe they're more likely to buy premium products, increasing your top line revenue. This is something that I'm sure is going to show up on your next Voice of the Fans survey.
Speaking of the Voice of the Fans study, it inspired our analysis when determining consumers' demand for premium products and their willingness to pay. In our analysis, we used primary research and secondary research. In our secondary research, we found a study that noted premium spend and demand in the 2018 NFL season. In our primary research, we conducted a survey in which we primed respondents with each of our scenarios. Then we asked a series of questions around 5 hypothesized premium segments, including food and beverage, comfort, accessibility, entertainment, and merchandise. Then we asked them about 2 premium categories, including essential and enhanced tiers. We wanted to make sure that we were creating a customized experience within our survey and maximizing share of wallet depending on respondents' varying levels of disposable income. Based on our survey results, we found that there was a demand for premium products. For example, given scenario C, in enhanced entertainment, we found that consumers are willing to pay up to $694 more than the average ticket price in that scenario. This could be for amenities or experiences such as a virtual reality or augmented reality experience, selfies with players, or a locker room tour. Also, based on our survey results, we found that there's a ton of demand in scenario A for essential food and beverage. This could possibly be a exclusive access to a premium lounge or bar or restaurant within the stadium. Now, while we understand that there is a high willingness to pay and a ton of demand for premium products, this means nothing if we can't capture that audience. Thus, in the next few slides, Neanth and I are going to walk through our marketing plan and tactics to capture this audience. Here's an example of a consumer persona for the premium millennial. While we understand that there are a ton of fan segments, we focused on the millennial in our example because based on our secondary research, there's a ton of opportunity here. Before business school, I worked in media for about 6 years, and every ad campaign started with the demographics of the target audience. However, we see a fundamental shift that the NFL clubs can leverage from demographics to psychographics to ensure customizing the experience for the fan on game day. So we want to continue with that personalization through the media and the messaging. As for the non-premium fan, as Rob mentioned earlier, we want to focus our messaging on the more cost-efficient ticket price and then really upselling on game day to ensure that we're maximizing our revenue. Now Neanth will walk through a consumer journey map.
As Tanya discussed, we flipped how we market to fans based on demographics. Now let's flip how we sell. It's time for fans to be able to call their own play. One creative idea our team had is to revamp the ticket buying customer journey for those interested in premium amenities. Now you're not just buying a ticket, you're buying the exact customized experience that you want out of a game. This could include fast passes to skip security lines or access to exclusive lounges, for example. Our assumption is that fans who are interested in premium amenities will be more elastic to their exact seat, so they would pick their premium amenities in advance and then just choose a general seating area. From there, teams could assess capacity and designate the exact seat on closer to game day. Based on in addition to our call your own play strategy, we've also compiled a full slate of marketing and sales tactics to cater to fans. First, let's start with loyalty programs. Clubs can encourage fans to join their respective loyalty programs and take advantage of the endowment progress effect, the phenomenon that motivates people to get to the next level and finish a task once they've already started it. Additionally, clubs can leverage the idea of fan zones that have been used successfully in the Premier League and block off sections in the stadium for fan groups to engage. While these different concepts will encourage earlier game ticket sales, we also focus on how to get fans into the stadium earlier with a couple out-of-the-box ideas. One idea would be to charge a ticket deposit upon point of sale, but then dynamically charge discounts that correlate to how early a fan entered the stadium. Additionally, there's an opportunity to provide exclusive video feeds from a player or referee's perspective that can only be accessed if you're inside the stadium. These strategies all tie in to the concept of contextual commerce, cross-selling products and services that are personalized to a consumer. Now, I know many of you who, I might get some groans from those of you who cater to older fan bases, but I think it's very clear that mobile app use and digital ticketing are waves that are taking over the industry, and especially NFL, and we believe this is going to create some interesting upselling opportunities. Teams can follow the familiar airline model and provide different amenities like skipping drink lines, and teams can provide, in advance of a game, teams can provide different premium amenities at different prices. On game day, teams can assess not only premium amenity capacity and demand, but they can also analyze past consumer consumption habits and provide opportunities like skipping drink lines, or if you're a Panthers fan, for example, providing access to Cam Newton's warm-up playlist. In conclusion, we believe there is substantial unearned revenue being left on the table. Rob talked about the optimal premium to non-premium offering ratio that teams in each case scenario can leverage. Tanya talked about our methodology for deriving consumer demand and customer willingness to pay, and I discussed some creative marketing and sales tactics that teams can leverage. We also performed a sensitivity analysis that corroborates our findings that teams can be earning millions of dollars in incremental revenue through revamping their premium offering strategy. Don't just win on the field, win inside your stadiums. Thank you for listening. We'd be happy to answer any questions about what we just presented or any additional analysis we performed.
Nicely done, guys. Impressed that you went out and did some primary research. Tell me about who that research population was.
Sure. Yeah, so we leveraged Qualtrics as a survey provider, and then we tried to reach out to, I think, over 100 different respondents, and we kind of found these to be more of the millennial types. And Tanya mentioned what we did, which I think was unique, is we primed them. So there was a third chance that you were going to be given a scenario from A, B, or C with the ticket price that you purchased, how your teams performed, and then what type of market you're in. And then we asked questions correlating to the willingness to pay and the demand for certain products.
And do you feel like that survey population is indicative of the NFL fan?
So we do believe that it was. However, one of the things we probably would have done if we had more time is we probably would have looked to expand that population. I've actually used Prolific in the past to try to reach a much broader base. It's a pay for service, so we didn't want to, in this instance, use it, but that's probably what I would do next if we had more time and some additional funding.
When you were mentioning the Falcons example, you were talking about lowering prices. Was it some of the idea that you could lower sort of the base ticket price, but then with these other sort of additions, you would get back to a higher price after that?
Sure. So when we were thinking about the Falcons, we kind of thought about everything as a basket of what you would spend on game day, with concessions being part of that, but a ticket price being a bigger driver. So we actually think it might be conservative to use that ratio. But yeah, so if you were to decrease it, we used that ratio. So if you decreased it X%, the increase in demand correlated with what the Falcons saw.
Okay, so it's not necessarily connected to some of the other sort of premium upgrades you're talking about in the future slides?
No, I think to build it off that, the idea would be the decrease in price you'd make up for the revenue based on increase in premium spend.
Okay, so like the two would go together?
Absolutely.
Okay.
As somebody who spends a better part of my life in planes, you know, so when you compare to the airline industry with the sort of the bundle of other things you can get in the course of your airport experience, you know, some of the qualitative response to that with some travelers was feeling like they were being kind of nickel and dimed, and that it was burying some of the costs of their plane ticket in things that, yeah, you know, I'm going to have to buy if I even want to have a basic, decent experience. So how do you combat the perception of people feeling like they're getting nickel and dimed once they show up to the stadium?
I think one way is basically on the exclusivity of experiences you're providing. Like a lot of the sort of premium amenities we did research on were more experiential. So no one necessarily buys a ticket and thinks, oh wow, like I'm getting a locker room tour as part of that. But if we were to include, we would include those type of experiential opportunities that like fans wouldn't necessarily expect, but we would be really excited for to take advantage of. And those would be the types of things we'd incite them to buy using our premium model, or our airline model. Appreciate it.
So a big thank you to our three teams. And I definitely don't envy being in these 5 seats right here at the front and having to make the decision as to who wins. They'll be deliberating after this session, and the winner will be announced at tomorrow night's Alpha Awards ceremony. So I'd like to give a big thanks to our judges and to our sponsors. And thank you all for joining us here this morning at the First Pitch Case competition. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.